with a sweet one bliss. Someone flicks me a bad body. So, it's another one, yeah. It's a first one, yeah. Oh, it's another one, yeah.
What's going on, people? Welcome back to the crossover. It's been a while, but we've got something to talk about. And that is the fact that the KSI 2 versus 1 fight is officially off. Before we get into that, hit up our sponsor, D-Rock Clothing, 40% off, iBoxingHub 24. You know the vibes. With that being said, let's go straight into it. So, as I mentioned, the fight between KSI versus Slim and Anthony Taylor is officially off now. But before we go into it, let's just go back beforehand and remember the reaction to when this fight was announced. Now, whenever KSI fights, there's always going to be intrigue and everyone's going to be excited for it because it's such a rarity. But when this fight was announced, I remember the reaction, and even mine personally, I wasn't the biggest fan of it. I just thought to myself that we're in a position where you could make it one-on-one, which is what a lot of people like to see. And I think nobody was overly interested in the particular gimmick fight itself. I think him fighting Slim would have been great. Obviously, we want Jake Paul, but that looks like it's a stretch, and we'll talk about that soon. But him fighting Slim would have been excellent. But they did go with the route of doing KSI versus Slim versus Anthony Taylor. And when they did the press conference, again, the reaction was KSI is not overly interested in this fight, and is it going to materialize, or people going to be overly interested themselves? Now, they did sell out the venue, and they always do because it's Misfits, and everyone who, whenever they go live for anything, because of the fan bases across all the fighters, they would naturally sell out. So fast forward to where we're at now, and KSI puts out the statement that everyone knew was coming. There was a lot of rumors, talks beforehand that this fight's probably not going to happen, and then put out the statement on Thursday to say, "Look, I've got an injury. Unfortunately, I'm not able to compete." And it's an injury that he's had to do the training camp, try to work on it, etc. But he will be doing some form of a concert, performing some songs, so he will be at the venue. And it got me thinking. I don't think that KSI is faking an injury or anything like that. Some people have said, "Oh, it's maybe not a real injury. He could have continued if it was a bigger fight." But I do believe he wasn't overly interested in this particular fight. There's also been talks of the fact that obviously with the Zone having the Misfits brand under there, they've got to do a pay-per-view card like they did with the Prime card. But and it was just a case of, okay, we need to put KSI on a card because otherwise it's not really pay-per-view. Now, I've said this plenty of times. Nothing will ever top the Prime card they did last year in Manchester. At that point in time, Misfits peaked. It was the top that they could possibly be. KSI, Tommy Fury, you had Logan Paul, and Dennis. Alongside that, a very solid undercard as well. You had Dean versus Waleed. And it was just a perfect card for Misfits crossover, whatever, Misfits boxing in particular. Now, you look at the position we're in at this present moment in time, and it did feel a bit forced. The fact that we had KSI fighting against Slim, which was cool, and I think Slim at the start of the year as well also pushed for it in the Lee's card. He was pushing for the fight. He was there handing out posters saying, "I want this fight. I want this fight." And yeah, we got the fight, but it felt forced because it was 2 versus 1. And I do believe at the end of the day, KSI was never fully interested in making this particular fight. Not necessarily making the fight, just fighting the fight. I don't think he's shortchanged anybody. I think if he was healthy, 100% this fight was happening. So I do believe that the injury definitely caused him to not fight. But I don't fully believe he was overly interested in promoting the fight and doing some of the legwork. I know obviously Slim and Anthony Taylor have talked about that on Twitter, saying that KSI isn't doing anything. He's not really promoting the fight with the tweets. And I agree with that because I think on the background, he probably knew that he wasn't going to be able to make the fight. But at the same time, there's other stuff, other projects he's involved in. At the end of the day, everyone knows that KSI loves the music and he's doing super, super well in the music field as well. So on the side, the boxing stuff was on the side, unless you gave him the fights that were that he really wanted, which was obviously Jake Paul, possibly the rematch with Tommy Fury, and Slim one-on-one as the third option. And we'll talk about Jake going forward. But as I said, the music side of things for JJ, KSI, whatever you want to say, that seems like at this moment in time, outside of YouTube, is the bigger priority to do. And you can see that with the fact that he's obviously said that, look, I am going to be there. I am going to perform my music because that's something he enjoys more. And that's fine as well, which is what I'm going to speak about as well throughout it. Now, when it comes to KSI in general, I'll say this. The fight that everyone wants and needs to have in this particular scene, just like in traditional boxing, where we said the fights we need to have is undisputed for a certain title, the fight we need to have is KSI Jake Paul. But I feel like as days get closer, we grow further and further apart. If you look at what Jake's doing, Jake's on a different path in terms of he's fighting other fighters, and people are calling it out that to say, smart matchmaking. But the truth is, when you start up your boxing career, every fight that you go is borderline smart matchmaking anyway. The problem that Jake has is he needs to always, unfortunately, he will always be the top billing on the card, and unless he fights somebody of the same or of some type of stature, nobody's going to be interested. He's not a regular fighter, unfortunately. He can't just sit on an undercard or work his way through a card. He will always be top billing. So he's got that issue where he can't just fight normal fighters. When it comes to KSI, he's also in that similar boat where he's only fighting if he can get the fights he really needs. And I think he's got actual end game when it comes to the influencer scene, which is eventually fighting Jake Paul. Now, when it comes to this particular fight, like I said before, I feel like it was that DAZN contractual thing that people have been talking about, that we need to do a pay-per-view card. And Mams has said this will still be a pay-per-view card. And I'm just interested to see how they do it. Right now, we had the first dropout, which was Bevo when he was meant to fight Danny Aaron's. And now we don't really have a main event. Are they going to have Slim on the card, still particularly potentially fighting somebody? That can be something that can be done. But how far is it where we look at it and we're like, it's pay-per-view for the sake of pay-per-view, and it's not really a boxing, it's not really a Misfits pay-per-view card. The difference compared to this and traditional boxing, you could say, is when the main event drops out, a lot of the card then becomes a regular card. And in this case, this Misfits card is also a regular card. The difference is because the guys that are fighting still have a significant following, Misfits can potentially look at this as an opportunity just to trial doing pay-per-view cards without KSI and seeing the response. It's obviously not going to be as big with KSI compared to without, but if the numbers are there and they have done this pay-per-view card where the dropout of KSI is 3 to 4 weeks just before the actual event, and they still produce solid numbers, that's a light bulb that should go off to Mams Taylor, to Misfits, to even DAZN, that we don't need to push KSI, we don't need to force KSI, because we still have enough of an audience that will buy our pay-per-view numbers, our pay-per-view card, and we can still be able to do something. As it goes to the live show as well, they've said that refunds can be done, which is cool. And I thought refunds will always be available once KSI drops out. Again, when it comes to the regular boxing world, I think if the refunds were being issued, a lot more will be snapped up, and they may even change the venue. This is where this influencer crossover boxing scene is different. They'll stick to the venue. There'll be tickets returned. I don't think it'll be as much of a large majority as people think. But this moment them tickets are returned and they go back on sale, they will be snapped up very quickly. So I do think, again, this is, as much as it's a setback because of who's not on the card, it's also a great opportunity for Mams Taylor, for Misfits, for DAZN to gauge the audience. We can trial the pay-per-view, see what numbers it does, see how many return tickets get done and how quickly they also get snapped up for this particular event. So I don't think it's as bad right now as people would think. Going forward, if you're gonna put KSI on a card, you're gonna have to do it where, again, as I said before, because of the music scene and obviously what he does with YouTube, you're gonna have to look at it to say, okay, we might have just one more fight with him. Realistically, it's two. No, from the opportunity side, there's two fights I think you can get with him, but again, it has to be the right opponent. It has to be one of the three. The first two are Tommy Fury as a rematch and Jake Paul. Like they go without saying. The third option becomes Slim. If you can get two fights from KSI, DAZN, everybody around there will be very, very happy. The realistic side is it's one fight. I personally believe that you'll get with KSI going forward. And that one fight, again, has to be one of the three opponents I listed. Ideally, one of the two that I mentioned at the start being the Tommy Fury rematch or Jake Paul. But if not, doing Slim and then see what happens afterwards. For me personally, I think KSI, after what happened with Tommy Fury and the judges, I understand why he probably hasn't got that much of an interest in boxing. And for that, he needs this real dance partner, which in my eyes is Jake Paul. But if we're going to do it, we're going to do it properly. We need to replicate what we saw in the Prime card. And the only way to do that for me is putting Deji on the card. If you put Deji and you put KSI, you do it in the UK, don't do it in America. That's the one thing I'm a bit worried about. If we get the Jake Paul fight, it's going to be in America. It's not going to be in the UK. And yeah, there's something about Misfits that hits better in the UK than it does in America. But yeah, as I would book it personally, yes, you put KSI, you put him with one of the three guys that I mentioned, but you also include Deji. The moment you do that, you 100% guaranteed will sell any arena out in the UK. And yes, when they sell out, they will probably hike the prices and it will be expensive because these particular prices in Dublin were very cheap compared to what we saw in the Prime card for the UK. These were significantly cheaper. So I think that's what you can do going forward. I think that will probably be my push for 2025. You do one final card with KSI and you include that with Deji. If you do it in America, fine. That you have to fight Jake. But if you do it in the UK, you sell out basically any arena in the UK 100%. For this particular card, you use it as an opportunity. I'm not against keeping it pay-per-view. I'm not against that because, again, as I said, this is an opportunity. But if you don't, I wouldn't be also mad about it because I understand why you drop it from pay-per-view. I think Bams has hinted it's still going to be pay-per-view, which is fine for me because I'm using it as an opportunity. But I'm super intrigued to see what the main event will be now going forward because I think that's going to be a big indicator as to what they can plug and pull from their pool of talent to be able to main event. But if you do KSI next year, if KSI does fight next year, no gimmick fight, one on one. Let's get it signed. Let's get it delivered. Hopefully, it will be Jake Paul, but I don't really think that's the case. They also have an event also coming in America soon. Again, the promotional side of that for me personally has been a bit lackluster. I think they can do a lot more, but unfortunately, that seems like the card before the main show, which is obviously in Dublin. But I do think slowly this week as well, because it is happening next Saturday, we're going to see a bit more of a momentum build towards that particular card. And yeah, I think it will also be a great night in America as well for the guys that are fighting on there. But personally, the American cards just simply do not hit the same way as the UK cards do. But let me know your thoughts. Like, share, subscribe. Again, hit up our sponsor, D-Rock Clothing. iBoxingHub 24. Get yourself 40% off. Until next time, Peace.
It's another bang. All the Muslim cars now, whichever get up. I start my card with a sweet one, please. Someone flicks me a bag, so it's another one. It's another one, yeah. It's a full strand, yeah. Oh, it's another one. It's another one, yeah.